Hello and welcome to the second in another doubleheader of Girls Stampede on this Friday. It's October, wait, is it the 2nd already? We're well into October already, aren't we? So tonight I am joined by Amber Gremore of Gremore Games. Hi, Amber.
Hi.
So Amber knows what day it is because you just launched a Kickstarter yesterday, right?
Correct.
How is that going for you? That's mini steel, right? That's right there.
Yep. Mini steel. So yeah, we are doing pretty good so far. We're a little over halfway to our funding goal, so not bad for day 2.
Not bad at all for a small self-published game.
Yep.
That is fantastic. So this is part of the reason we're here. We started talking about mini steel, you and I, and you sent me over the game, and then I was like, you know what? I would love to have you on Girls Stampede to talk about your experiences in the hobby, because that is what we do over here at Girls Stampede, is highlight women who are in this industry and, you know, making games. So I wanted to bring you on to talk about that. And given that you just happen to have a Kickstarter launching yesterday, it seemed like a good thing to talk about for all those folks who are like, well, how do I get my game out there if I want to self-publish it? Or even publishers that are just trying to get over into Kickstarter that maybe weren't doing that before, doing pre-orders or a different structure. So you want to launch a Kickstarter. Here's some insider topics on it. So hopefully those folks who join us in chat will add in some questions that they might have about the process. And we can talk about what you've learned as you've gone through this adventure.
Sounds good.
So I want to start with Gremore Games. How did Gremore Games get started?
Yeah, so I want to say about 2.5, 3 years ago, my husband started having the idea for mini steel. And it started out just as like a fun solo project. And, you know, I posted a couple weeks ago, like a throwback Thursday of the prototype process of, you know, going from cardstock to, you know, first iteration, second iteration, and so on. And as it kept getting developed and we kept having more people play it, it became more of a reality for us. And it became something that we were talking about all the time. So we would be having a date night or something, and all of a sudden an idea would come into one of our heads about a new card or a new functionality within the game. And it just became, you know, a everyday topic for us. And then we decided that we wanted to try to, you know, make that a reality, because we started having additional ideas for games and things like that. And Gremore Games was kind of born, and now we're co-founders of a new indie game company.
That is incredible. So yeah, I can imagine that. It sounds like it was a passion for you, really. Mm-hmm. You know, those things that just become all-encompassing and you're focusing on so much. But I love that it was a partnership between you as well. So you must have, did you both have other jobs before this that you were?
Yeah, so we still do, like a lot of indie game companies, I feel like.
Right.
So yeah, we both have full-time jobs, and on the side, I actually do photography as well for like families and stuff. So we're definitely busy, but
Yeah, it sounds like it.
The fact that, you know, I do photography and Brian, my husband, does graphic design, it kind of went really well for game creation, because we have that kind of artistic eye, and, you know, we love gaming, so it fit pretty naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you do for play testing? Were you just doing the play testing? Did you bring in friends and family? How did you handle that?
Yeah, lots and lots of friends and family.
Yeah.
So it was a, you know, something this portable. Brian kind of kept it at work. So,
yeah.
You know, on lunch breaks and different break times, you know, they'd have groups of people together kind of play testing almost every day.
Yeah.
So you're able to get a lot of rounds in and a lot of questions from a lot of people that are going to be fairly brutally honest with you and tell you, yeah, I'm not really a fan of this functionality, or what if you thought of it this way? And are able to work out a lot of the kinks early on by having so many, rounds played all the time.
That you bring up a really good point too, that I think some people miss when, especially in a first game, and something that's independently developed, you're doing everything. So you're starting with design, and then you're going into and doing the development and the play testing. And one of the things about development that I learned was I had to tell people when we were play testing, listen, the worst thing you could do is tell me this game is great. I need you to tell me what's wrong with it, what you don't like, what isn't clear to you, what's broken. I need you to break my game so I can make it better. If I just hear, because, some people are like too nice, that the game's great, then I'm never going to get to that next level in the gameplay. So it sounds like you knew right away, like, no, we need folks who are going to be brutally honest with us. And apparently that's your coworkers and family and friends.
Good people surround you, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely probably one of the hardest parts about creating a game, right? Is you start having this labor of love, and you have to be okay with people not liking aspects of it, and realizing that something that you thought was potentially a great idea may not work for everybody else, and weighing out what might be like a solo opinion versus like everybody is not a fan of this aspect of the game.
Yes, very, very true, because you can't take everything to heart. There will be outliers. There will be information you get in where that person just didn't like it, but everybody else really loves it. So you do have to make those decisions of, is this really impactful and do I need to make a core change, or is this just kind of outlier information and I should let it go? Those are really hard things to get to the bottom of. So that's amazing that you were able to do that. And especially being so close to the project, because we often hear in this industry, a designer shouldn't be the developer of their own game. And I'll put that out there because it sounds like you really addressed that in understanding you needed to hear the negatives and that was actually beneficial, versus it can be hard when a game's your baby to hear that piece sucks. Like, don't do that.
Exactly. And, I definitely get why a lot of people don't self-develop because it is a hard thing. And even, going through review processes and things like that, it's hard listening to critiques of something that, you have helped along the entire way through the process. But, you know that it's all good feedback.
Yeah. It again, hard to do. I've developed games, and I have to remind myself at times, like, don't take it personal, take the input. But you'll see me, especially in playtesting, sometimes I get really quiet. It's because my brain's like, oh, I thought I had that. Like, it didn't work. And I'm not mad at the people, but myself, right? Because I'm like, oh, darn, that didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. But being able to kind of get past that and say, well, this is an opportunity, got to fix it a different way. Or I remember in one of my cases, and then I'll ask you if you've ever had this experience, I remember actually, for one of the games I developed, being really embarrassed at one point because I made a fix to the game that I thought was tremendous. And it worked really well at 3 and 4 players, and I was super happy with it. And then I sat down with somebody I really respected to have them play test the game with me at 2-player. It was broken. It was so broken because the changes I made worked great at 3 and 4 player, but destroyed the 2-player game. And I remember being so embarrassed because I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, this is the worst. And it is not a good game at this point. And luckily we were at a convention, and I was like, on Sunday, we'll play again. I'm going to fix it. And then we'll come back and sit down and, really play it. And they were super gracious. They were wonderful. But did you ever have an experience where you saw things come out that you were like, oh no, that's not good?
I think one of the biggest things that we've seen with this particular game, and it's kind of why we have it geared for a 2 to 4 player game, is, we've played it in, larger group settings, but it's so easy for someone to get fully ganged up on before they even have a turn
Yeah.
in this type of a format, that we knew we had to limit the, group size, because it kind of takes the balance out of the game when it gets too large.
Yeah. So we have Ed Duncan is joining us. It's a groundbreaking week for him because he's made 2 live streams in 1 week. So thank you, Ed, for joining twice. And he said he has so much appreciation for designers and loves learning the design process because he himself has no desire to put through the effort to actually create a game. And I really identify with that. The one piece of this that I've never touched is design. I have ideas, but I don't know, maybe someday, but the design to me seems really tricky. And you talked about how, your husband had this design idea. What did it come from? Was it just, like, how did you, I assume he's told you, and, you've seen this process come to life. Like, what made him just say, you know what, I'm going to sit down and turn this into a game. I think it's a good idea.
So essentially what kind of inspired him to begin with is we had a couple of friends that have each kind of created their own individual games just for personal use, not for publishing. And we were playing one of those games, and it had tiles that were like this little square size, which is what the size of the cards in Mini Steel.
Right.
And he was sitting there thinking, okay, it would be really cool to have a small compact game that could fit into like the set of cards.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the initial inspiration. And then, he plays a ton of games. I mean, we play a lot of games together too, but he had, Card Thief and Gilded Dungeoneering that he played on mobile. And, we played different games like Exploding Kittens and Munchkin and, Dead of Winter, and different aspects of all of those have kind of come into the inspiration for this game. So he knew he kind of wanted to go down that route. And honestly, it was also during the time that we were watching Game of Thrones.
No.
So you'll see some of that medieval-esque Game of Thrones.
I can see that in the game. Yeah.
So that was good. A lot of, the inspiration for the design of the different cards.
That's awesome. So you heard it here, Ed. So there was actually some Game of Thrones inspiration. And there is with the weaponry you're battling. Yep. So I can totally...
Weaponry, dragons.
Yep. Yep. And these are the things that happen often when you ask the designer their process. That's something that they were in the midst of or was a big part of what was going on at the time. And they kind of incorporate that in. So that is awesome to hear. Yeah, I can totally see that. I need to go back. I missed a lot of Game of Thrones. So now I feel like I need to go back through and we could just play some Mini Steel while I'm rewatching all of Game of Thrones. That seems great.
I feel like the theme song would be like perfect background music.
Yes,
as you play the game.
It would. It would be very good for going back and forth. We have Brianna and Corey in chat too. And I want to point that out because they're a husband and wife team. They're always joining in chat and talking about games, and they game together as well. So it is always nice to see that. I feel like having a partnership where you both enjoy games and, don't get angry at each other when you beat each other or win. I think that dynamic really, really helps. So yeah, more team, partner team up for gaming is always good. Oh, and Tim's chiming in. All right, we've been playing Mini Steel for months now, and we love it. Youngest to oldest game has us hooked. Nice. So yeah, so what is the youngest age? Do you feel like this can go for kids as well?
Yeah, so we have on it that it's 8 and up.
Yeah.
We've had as young as 5 catch on. But it is a little complicated just to kind of learn the combination cards that you can play together and things like that. So that's why we have the 8 and up. But, our, kids and even nieces and nephews that are younger than that have been able to catch on and play.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean, especially if you're playing all the time too. My kids will play test games or play games, and I've always felt that they could do things a lot younger than the ages on the box. And it's not that they're unusual in any way. It's just that because we play so many games, they get kind of the idea of what's going on and how to approach games. The more you play, the more you know about, the mechanisms and stuff. So
yep.
That helps as well. So yeah, so you have two sons?
Yep, 2 boys.
Yeah. So were they play testers too?
after a while. So it got pretty far into development before we started bringing them in. Our youngest, he's 7, so he's kind of at the bottom age limit of what we would expect to play. So, he's not as good as our almost 9-year-old who, likes to torture his little brother a little bit with the game.
Yeah.
But they enjoy playing, and it's really fun kind of having them kind of go grab the game and ask us to play something that we've, developed and created over some of the other games that we have on the shelf.
Yeah, that is really, really awesome. I'm sure they're proud of you too. I mean, just the fact that you created a game. I know, kids don't tend to say it directly, but I'll hear my kids talk, even about me being on YouTube. Like, I remember my son at one point, his friend was like, "You don't know YouTube." And he's like, "Dude, my mom's a YouTube star." And I'm like, "Not really, but like, okay, thanks." So I guess it gave him some street cred that I appear on YouTube sometimes. But yeah, so that's great. I like hearing that it's kind of a family endeavor too. And this brings us back to Kickstarter. I think that also is really important for launching a game on Kickstarter. And you've done a really good job leading up to this campaign, talking about that, doing some, Throwback Thursday posts and things showing how the game has progressed and really talking about Gremore Games as well. And I think that really helps people want to back because they feel like they're supporting you, and that you created this. And I think backers often really want to know who they're supporting when they're going to put money behind a game months before they receive it.
Right.
So how has that been for you this time, and then we'll talk about last time as well.
All right. I would say this time it's been amazing. So one of the things that Brian and I talk about all the time, and I know we've posted about it before too, is how welcoming and supportive the gaming community is on social media, especially. Just everyone kind of rallies around people, and it's really interesting being like very new. I mean, this is our first game. This is our, first, entrance into this industry. And the amount of support and people that have kind of rallied behind us has been amazing.
That's really good to hear. And we do, we often say it and we often hear it as well, that there are so many good people in this industry. Being a niche industry and this tiny little hobby, everybody mostly knows each other as well. So we do try to be like, now I say we, but I was entering this, 5-6 years ago as well. And as you enter, it's amazing to see everybody be so welcoming and not uber competitive, because there is this feeling in the hobby that the more folks who do well, the more everyone is going to do well, because you aren't going to just play one game. So if you get hooked by whatever game, then move on. You're just going to get more games. So it's not the same competitiveness where you kind of want to block or do anything like that. No, not at all, because the more great games there are, the more people will join the hobby potentially through those games. So I'm glad you found that part of the industry that's welcoming and bringing you in. So we alluded to you. This is actually the second time Mini Steel went to Kickstarter. In July, you launched your first campaign for it. So tell me about that a little bit.
So that was essentially the true first time Kickstarter, not knowing what you're getting yourself into, try. So I feel like it's one of those things that everything that we didn't know we could do wrong, we did wrong.
Yeah.
So
you don't know what you don't know. That's the thing.
Exactly. We knew we had a great game. What we didn't know is how to get like a following behind it and how to get some credibility behind it. Because one of the things that you don't necessarily think of right away is that, as a brand new game developer, people don't have a reason to trust that you're going to get a game into their hands and that you're going to get a quality game that is going to be fun and, have some longevity into their hands. So that's definitely one of the things that we did better, I hope, the second time around. Just, finding some individuals that have, that following in the industry, willing to take a look at our game and, provide their input and their feedback and their honest reviews so that we could share that with the people that are, checking out our Kickstarter campaign, and they can see that, hey, this is a game that people are enjoying, and,
Yes.
There's something behind it.
Yeah, and that you've put the time into it. This isn't something that isn't created yet. I mean, you have the game. The game is done. And that's also, if it's going to be your first Kickstarter, that's some advice that I would give is for your first Kickstarter, while Kickstarter is great for coming up with a concept and saying, here's what I'm going to give you, when you're talking about your first board game, that's really, really hard to get funded. For your first, you really need to have it done. A lot of more established publishers can say, here's our concept, it's going to get further dev, not final work, it's a work in progress, because they've delivered so many. They're going to deliver at this point, and that they have a development team working on it, that it's all going to work out. When it's your first one, you're not going to have that kind of clout for people to say, oh, I trust that'll work out. You haven't done it before, you haven't earned that. So having it done like you do and being able to show, okay, not only do we have it done, we provided it to these reviewers, they've seen it, they've played it, it works. It's a game, and folks are playing it and enjoying it. Yeah, you've done a great job. And I'm on social media all the time because that's currently where I am in the industry, just marketing all the time. But I've seen a lot of posts about the game. So you're doing really well this time around with making sure that people have seen it and are talking about it. And that does really develop trust with folks who aren't sure if this is something that's going to come through. So
exactly.
Well done.
And it's one of those things, like, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
Looking back, it makes total sense. Like, why someone would be a little hesitant to just jump on board with us, with us having no background in the industry and, no reviews to kind of show and things along those lines. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, after we took a step back and really analyzed what went wrong, it was one of those things that we said, okay, this is what we have to do. This is one of the main things that we need to change for the next round.
Yeah, I mean, credibility. And you'll see a lot of the Kickstarters even have a section devoted to that. Why back this Kickstarter? Why you should trust us. What do we have for you, and how can we, set your minds at ease? Because it's rare, but it has happened that things haven't delivered. So, thank goodness, knock on wood, it's been really, really rare for this hobby that is the case, enough that most people know exactly what hasn't been delivered, and they're kind of notorious. So it's not something that's uber common, but obviously people aren't going to want to just put money out there for something, when they don't kind of see that it exists or for the first time. So something you learn, absolutely. Hi, Luke. Luke's joining us in chat. And everybody in chat, feel free to ask any questions. If you have any questions about what, it takes to make a Kickstarter happen, feel free to chime in and ask, anything that you've been wondering about. So we've talked about the fact that this is your second time. I do want to point out that's not uncommon either, even for publishers that do have a few games out there. Formal Ferret, Gil Hove is a wonderful, wonderful friend, and he relaunched a Kickstarter after learning some things with the first launch of a game that he had recently. And many others have had success with that as well. There are things that you can learn. Maybe the timing isn't right. Maybe, other games that are up at that particular time on Kickstarter are going to take away from your audience, and it's something you need to wait on. Or maybe you need to go back and get that marketing engine built up before you launch it on Kickstarter. So those are all things that happen, and it doesn't mean anything about the game. It can just be a situational thing as far as getting the game the traction that it needs. But for this time, I mean, you're only a day in, and you said almost 50% funded. So that's
we're a little
really
over.
good.
Yep.
Yeah, for a first game, that's excellent. And yeah, so congrats on that. I'm sure
Thanks.
Things will go well. How long of a campaign did you decide to do?
Just over a month. So
Okay.
I believe it's November 4th it'll end.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be a Wednesday end date. And these are the things, in industry, we talk about this all the time. Like, what are the best days to start? And, you know, there was the entire consensus of launch on a Tuesday. Always launch on Tuesday was like a big thing for a while, but it becomes like that. If you've ever been to Walt Disney World, there are these websites you can go to that tell you what day to go to what park. The problem with that is then everybody goes to those websites and goes to those parks on those days. So you just broke the system, and now they're the busiest on those days. So that's what I always compare it to with the, you know, kind of Super Tuesday Kickstarter launch. Okay, but now everyone's doing that. So sometimes picking another day is actually more beneficial. And I think you did well. I think picking a Thursday launch, a first of the month launch for a first game is actually a really good idea for a new publisher. Because if you're in there on Super Kickstarter Tuesday with all these, you know, huge CMON games or other, you know, games with notoriety, you could get lost in the shuffle. So that's one thing I do tend to give as advice is either get in there on Monday or wait a couple days and do, and you know, yours was perfect because first of the month, do that and start then, give yourself the weekend. Because if everybody's doing the same thing, it becomes less the great thing that it once was touted to be. So well done with that as well, because that can be a tough thing. But October's looking to be a big month for Kickstarter as well. So there's pros and cons to that additionally, right? Because you're going to get more people on Kickstarter, hopefully, and maybe they'll find Mini Steel just through pop-ups and, you know, notifications. So that's great. But there's also a lot of other games on Kickstarter.
Exactly. It's that bittersweet thing. And that's one of the things that I've definitely been noticing leading up to this. Like, we had picked a date and we're like, okay, yep, this is great. And you start to see all the other games that are going out there. And it's one of those things, like, you're excited because it's going to draw in that traffic, but you also want to make sure that you kind of pop.
Yes, you still need to stand out. So what are some of the things you tried to do to stand out this time?
I would say, like, we went a little, we definitely tried to be a little more professional looking within the campaign. So that was one of the things that we kind of went through. And after we did not succeed the first time, we just kind of went through all the different campaigns that were on Kickstarter at that point that we liked, and made note of what we enjoyed and what we didn't. And that was one of the biggest things for us, is saying, okay, you know, using the Kickstarter format that just happens to be there is not necessarily what's going to draw the eye.
Right.
You know, having, you know, specialized graphics that relate to the game, that you're giving all the information that's needed, but still in a fun way, including more videos, reviews, all those different things, the how-tos, the instructions are right in there. And, you know, having a image that pops more than we had last time, just to kind of draw the eye and get a little attention that way.
All great ideas. And I want to say hi to Joe, Thomas, and Luke have joined us as well in chat. And Thomas has a question. So he's saying that Kickstarter seems to have evolved into a very sophisticated tool, which requires a lot of expertise. Do you feel solo small designers are at a disadvantage? Is this potentially the wrong tool for them? What do you think about that?
I think it potentially could be very difficult. So we're pretty lucky. Like I said, me doing photography and Brian doing graphic design, it works out really well for us as an indie game designer to be able to create a Kickstarter page that can still be eye-catching without a group of developers behind us.
Yes.
For people that don't have that, it does get a lot more difficult. And then you're looking at having a much higher, like, starting investment, you know, having people that you're paying to do that work for you. So it's very difficult from an indie game perspective if you don't just happen to have that skill set, but have a great game idea.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think, speaking to that, so you have your strengths because you have the photography and you do have the graphic design as well to be able to design the page and get things up that you need on there. And you learned about the marketing. Okay, we need to have reviewers and videos and how-tos as well. It's speaking to that, it's about knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, I feel. And anytime, I mean, even if you're starting anything, if you're starting a new business, right, and it's a restaurant, you're going to rely on people to help you with that. So don't think that just because it's Kickstarter and just because you can do it yourself, that that means you should. If you're really serious about taking your game or anything to Kickstarter and getting it made, it may involve some outside help because you're not going to be good at every single thing, or rarely is somebody good at everything, right? So determining what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think is really, really important. And if you have some areas that you know you just are not going to know, and we talked about like you don't know what you don't know, so whether that's marketing or whether that's, you know, I don't know how to reach out to these reviewers and get them to respond, or it's, you know, what you two actually excelled at, but for some, they wouldn't know how to get the photography done or how to get the graphic design of the page done. And it's a good point that Kickstarter does attempt to help. It has setups, it has suggestions, but you have to keep in mind that Kickstarter covers a wide array of different types of merchandise. So it's not just board games. And we are in a niche and pretty unique hobby that you have to address the concerns that those particular folks are going to have about getting a board game. It's not just, you know, are they going to be able to make me this toaster well, right? It's, you know, sure, if they're manufacturing in a plant, it's probably going to be made decently. It's going to be tested so it's not an explosive device, right? It's not going to explode. So there's certain things that you can expect. But with a board game, you can't expect, right? There's no one certifying that these mechanisms work well together or that you're, you know, going to enjoy that type of game. So that's where you need reviewers and other folks chiming in about what's in the game, whether it's for or not for them. Because it may be a type of game that just isn't in their wheelhouse. And, you know, that's important to kind of address too. Because you don't want upset people who have bought the game. You want the right people getting it. So definitely is it a disadvantage? Yes, in that a company is going to already have your marketing department, your developers, your, you know, everything all in-house, graphic design, photography. And even the smaller publishers that don't, they know who to bring in and do that. They have a budget to get that done. So are you at a disadvantage? Yeah, I think that's valid to say. So the best thing you can do is try to magnify your strengths, learn what your weaknesses are, and try to get help. Whether, you know, family, friends, what do we normally do, right? Like if you're trying something out of the box like this. And so Joe chimes in as well. Was it difficult doing the pre-launch groundwork without the 2020 conventions? That's a really good question. And if so, how did your strategy have to change?
So I would say that's probably one of the benefits of being kind of new to the industry is
True.
we didn't have that to compare to. So
Right.
Was it difficult? Maybe. Not sure. Since we don't have the comparison, we
Right.
can't really say whether it was better or worse. But I think everyone has been so just missing the, you know, connection that you have from, you know, gaming with friends and going to those conventions and things like that, that I feel like it's amplified what's happening on social media and the interactions that everyone's having there. So it's made it a little bit easier, I think, for an indie game that's brand new to kind of come to the table in that sense.
That is a really good point. That makes me wonder if that actually hasn't helped level the playing field a little bit for indie publishers, in that, you know, usually, and just comparing to one convention, go to Gen Con, because biggest in the US, but thinking about Gen Con, you get grandfathered into these really great spaces, right? And as a new indie game designer, you're not going to get those, you know, prime real estate in the hall. You're going to end up over in what they call the alley. It's called the alley for a reason. It's literally an alley over by beautiful artwork and tchotchkes and dice. And it's a great thing to peruse, but people tend to just peruse. They tend to just go quickly. And it's hard to get folks over because there's so many brand new games, Gen Con releases and shinies, and there are folks who are going to go look for those hidden gems, and then most aren't, right? They're there for, you know, Twilight Imperium 16 or, you know, whatever else is coming out. They're not there to go hunt and find. Whereas over in Europe, I find it a little bit different. UK Games Expo and Essen, there definitely are a lot of folks that go to those looking for the hidden gems, looking for those games that no one's talking about. And there's like this concentrated effort. Like when I see other media folks at those events, people are coming together and saying, what'd you find? Not what's the big release, but like what's the niche thing that I can't get anywhere else that I can go look at, so that indie designers like yourself actually have a shot over there. And it's really about those tiny little things. And Gen Con just isn't. So had you been going to things like Origins and Gen Con, maybe you would have gotten the game in front of folks more, but probably not to the scale, right, that these other publishers, the bigger publishers with the prime real estate, would have gotten for their big releases that they kind of need. So with them not having that, and you having the ability to get these things out there, and you've done really well with it. So I say having the ability, but you really obviously have a skill set that allowed you to get really good images of the game up, get the page made really nicely, and then you're really engaging and friendly, and you were great about reaching out about the game and being enthusiastic about the game. And, you know, just speaking for myself, I knew that made me want to help you because you were so, like, you're just so happy. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, I'll take it. And I get a lot of requests, a lot of DMs, you know, oh, could I send this to you? You do some pictures, do this, do that. And I can't do all of them. I used to try, and it's too much. I can't, there's too much. So I've learned that I have to kind of say no to some things. But you were so engaging and sweet, and I was like, no, I got to do something with this. There's got to be something. So yeah, so you do have that skill set to kind of make use of what you have available. So great question, Joe. And I guess I'm also kind of hoping that maybe that leveled the playing field a little bit for some of the indie designs to make it out there in front of people's eyes on social media, since the cons weren't the main thing. Luke also has a question. He said, did you mention not knowing what you don't know? Yes, we did that. How do you apply that to cultural or minority community concerns? So there's been a lot of talk in the industry. I'll just give a little, and I think this is what, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, if this isn't what you're addressing. But yeah, when we're talking about not knowing what you don't know, there are games, not so much mini steel, but there are games that come out that have themes that are, you know, part of certain cultures. So yeah, how do you make sure that you're not making others feel unseen or offended? He clarified. Yeah. So two parts to that. One, if it has any cultural appropriation, how do you make sure that it's covered correctly so that you're not appropriating but representing that culture in the gameplay? And then also really just making sure that you're not, you know, excluding people from playing your games. And without conventions, you know, massive, anyone can come over and play it. How did you kind of handle that you were reaching out to a wide variety of folks? What did you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for us, especially from like a reviewer perspective, because like you had mentioned, our game doesn't quite touch on that as much as some others do.
Right.
It's just a matter of, you know, finding the viewpoints and things that you kind of align to, but making sure that it's a broad spectrum. So, yes, you know, we try to bring as much different diversity as you can. I mean, there's only like so many people.
Yes.
You know, reviewing world, but trying to get as many different viewpoints as we could through that process. So going to some potentially other countries, or across different ethnic diversities and everything else that we could find, to kind of bring that to light with our game as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's definitely at the forefront right now throughout the industry, as it should be, and throughout the world. But, as it should be, we need to make sure that everybody's getting a chance and everybody's being represented. And, that's not going to change overnight as far as you said, it's a small world of media content creation. But the more that we do to help those who are starting out, or give those voices that are here the time, and get them reviewing it, then the better it is for everybody, because you will get that breadth of insight and input from people, which is really important. Because again, and I've always said this, I'd actually ask this question to you too. My feeling has always been that publishers as well, having come from both sides myself, because I've worked as a publisher and work with publishers now, but also do content creation, I really don't feel a publisher wants their game in the hands of somebody who's not going to enjoy it. That it doesn't make sense in this industry to market your product to just everyone. Obviously, sales are good, but if those sales are going to turn into negative reviews and a lower BGG rating and people getting on there to complain about the game, that can impact you long term. It's not what you want in a niche hobby like this, because people are going to go look or ask others. And when they hear, oh, that game was terrible, well, maybe it was just terrible for them. Maybe they just didn't like that mechanism. Maybe they don't like two-player attacky type games. That's just not what they like. You don't want to negatively impact what your game is thought of just because it wasn't their game type. So making sure folks know exactly what the game is, what they might like about it, what they might not like about it, is super important, I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, that's one of the big things, as an indie game company reaching out to reviewers, there were reviewers that said, no, this is not my kind of game. Yeah. And, we respect that, because, we don't want someone that has no interest in this style of game to be wasting their time playing something that they know they're not going to enjoy, because it's not going to do either of us any service to have them, not enjoy the game and then, say that about it as well. So, you want to make sure that it's getting into the hands of the people that are going to enjoy, that combative type of game for us.
Yes.
But yeah, to your point, that's not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good to be really clear about that, I think. Because, it's unique, because for some marketing, you want everyone to buy it. Like, you just don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. But not for board games. It really doesn't, it doesn't tend to work out well if you just sell your game to everyone. They're not going to, necessarily like a Vital Lacerda game if, their favorite game is Wingspan, right? Both great genres of games, just not the same. Get it in the right hands. So let's see. Thomas says, as a publisher, how do you feel about responding and addressing Kickstarter comments about game components, play, and design? Is it sometimes too much or too little? Good question. Do you feel overwhelmed yet?
Not yet. So, I mean, we actually haven't had too many questions around components this time around. I feel like we've been a little more clear, kind of showing images of what's included, videos of what's included, and kind of within our stretch goals, the extras or changes that could come up. But I think it's fair to ask those types of questions, and people want to know what they're going to get, because you kind of want to understand and almost estimate the value of what you're expecting the game to be. And without understanding some of those questions, you can't determine for yourself if it's worth the pledge amounts that are on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, are you going to get that level of enjoyment out of it? And that's a question we get a lot, is this game worth it? Should I buy it? I hear that all the time. And I'm like, I don't know. You need to decide for yourself. Like, Would I buy it? Yes. But does that mean it's for you? What's your game group like? Are they going to enjoy this? Are you going to get it off the shelf more than once? Is this something you'll be able to play consistently? Is this something you can play with your family? Those are questions that you do need to ask yourself. So setting up your Kickstarter page to help folks answer those questions for themselves, I think, Thomas, that would be my thought, is that you want to think about the questions that folks are going to have about your game, and honestly set up the Kickstarter page in that way. Go through it and say, okay, we're going to answer the questions we believe people will have. And if you do dive into a marketing plan early, getting things on social media, engaging an audience on BGG, then you can start to actually see the questions people are going to have. By putting it out there, they'll ask them there as well. And maybe chime in, as long as you can get people seeing your stuff. Maybe even go to one of the many Facebook board game groups and say, what are your questions? Like, what do you think? If I show you this game, is there anything unclear? Is there anything you want to know? This is how you then can realize what you're going to need to answer for folks on Kickstarter. Because the comments can be constant. I've run more than a dozen campaigns at this point. And sometimes the comments are inundating you. Usually that means there's something wrong on the page. It means you can see that it'll be 6 questions, like right in a row, the same question. And obviously in your mind you might think, okay, could you all just look at the answer to the, because you've answered it 5 times. But the fact is, if you're being asked a question over and over again, you didn't answer it well. Like you do need to kind of think about, why am I getting the same question over and over again? There's got to be a reason. And even if you think you answered it on the Kickstarter page, you clearly didn't do a good enough job if you're getting the same comment. That said, the bigger the size of the campaign, you're just going to be inundated with comments, because it's going to be percentage-wise to the number of backers. So it can be that they are just all over the board, and people asking questions that maybe were clearly laid out in the page. You're just going to get the questions anyway. So you do your best, and my recommendation, I'll ask this of you, Amber, as well. My recommendation is always take breaks and plan for it as far as the comments go. Because for myself, it can be really addicting to stay in those comments. And keep in mind, and behind the scenes, you may not know this, there's also messages that come in from the Kickstarter. And a lot of people who haven't run a Kickstarter don't necessarily realize you have an inbox in there, plus you have your comments, plus you have all of social media and posts and BGG that you're monitoring. So it's not just comments, but all across the board that you're monitoring. And it can be addicting to keep up with that, but you got to sleep. And we used to joke about in this hobby, like, oh, get your power bars, get your Gatorade, don't sleep for 6 days. That's a bad plan. Don't do that. People have done it. Don't. Plan for help. And so my question to you, Amber, is, did you guys plan to like divvy up maybe even time looking at that stuff, you and your husband, or do you have any other help as well?
Yeah, so I took yesterday and today off to try to, that's another thing that we learned the first time around. Don't work the first couple of days of a campaign. You will not get any work done.
No. Yeah, even just from the distraction and excitement, but yes.
But yeah, I think we do a fairly good job divvying it up between the two of us. We do also have, some help within the family that are always willing to kind of lend a hand if and when we're overwhelmed or inundated with, lots of questions and things like that. Because, the nice thing, this has been a, family effort. Like, everyone's been so supportive within our family that they know the game in and out, so they can answer most of the questions that we would get asked anyway. So
that's
if and when
so good. That's awesome.
Get to that point, we have that help.
Good. Yeah, planning for that, I think, is key. And I think that's something that people miss. Giving yourself those breaks really make the campaign fly by instead of drag on and suck the life out of you. So try to do that. And even if you have help that can't necessarily answer every question, that's okay. I've had really small publishers I've helped that just didn't have, staff to do comments. And I've made it very clear, like, I'll cover these hours. You're gonna need to have somebody do these hours. I'm usually working with folks in Europe, so it works great because they're asleep when I'm awake when they're asleep. It's great. So we'll just split that way. But even if they leave for me, the ones that are too intricate for them to respond to, they've still helped tremendously in keeping it up to date so that then I can jump in and just get those couple and not feel like, oh, I shouldn't have taken those 6 hours to sleep because now I've got all this to catch up on and this other stuff to do. So do as much as you can before you launch and then try to plan for some breaks and help while you're launching, or it can be overwhelming. And that's again, you don't know what you don't know. It's not predictable how something is going to hit with people and how many comments you're going to get. It never is. One thing I do want to point out before I forget, I always say one thing, my prime advice to folks going through a Kickstarter is there's always one huge thing that goes wrong. So it's like a wedding. There's always one big thing that you're like, oh, wow, that's not good. Every campaign I've had. So the thing is, by knowing that and preparing for it, I'm always relieved when it happens, if that makes sense, because then I know what it is and it's happened and we can move on now. So if you plan for it that way, that's at least what works for me and is always my prime advice, is something really big. One campaign I did for Twist Gaming, I had all the updates pre-written. They were in there. I mean, they're drafts. I can change them as stuff happens in the campaign, listening to backers, doing what we're going to do. That's fine, but just things set up, as how they were going to go out. They all disappeared. Kickstarter did an update. Everything was gone. And I'd done them directly in Kickstarter. I don't do that anymore, but I had done them directly in Kickstarter, so they were just gone. So I had to start over. And okay, that was the worst thing that happened. I had to write all the updates again. And I learned, put those in Word, copy and paste them over. Don't trust Kickstarter. It is a website. And so, there's always, if you plan kind of that way, there will be something big. Just get through it. I think that helps as well. So did you have any big moments this campaign where you were like, oh no?
Not yet. We did have one scare so far.
Okay.
Where there was some error happening in the mobile app of Kickstarter for us.
No.
And when I went in and clicked on some of the pledges, it was showing a ship date of 4 or 5 months earlier than what we had it set up for. So it made us hurry up, grab a computer, go on the real site, make sure everything is all set up correctly. And luckily it was, but it caused us to then, hurry up and send a message to Kickstarter saying, hey, just so you're aware this is happening.
Fix this. Don't do that. That sounds, no. You don't want a backup delivery. You always want to push it a little bit. So Antoni asked, what are your thoughts on actively involving backers over the course of the campaign? If you consider it a good thing, if not integral, in your opinion, what's the best way to get backers involved? I love this question. What are your thoughts on that?
I love the question too. And I would say for us, that's still something that we're working through. It's one of those polarizing things of whether someone loves to get updates or hates to get updates.
Yes.
So it's finding that balance in between, I feel like, for us, wanting to provide updates, but also find a way to bring the backers in.
Yeah.
So more to come on what we'll be doing from that perspective.
Surprises, spoilers. You have to go follow the campaign.
Yes, follow.
Yes, it's linked up above, people, so it's in there. You can go take a look.
But yeah, it's one of those things that it really also depends on how invested you are in the game too.
Okay.
I know that just from my own personal experience, there have been games that I'm like, yeah, I want the game, but I didn't necessarily enjoy all the updates that I was receiving.
Yes.
And there are ones where I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of exciting the way that, they're playing this out and, involving everybody and
Yes.
maybe, involving from what's being created, or it may just be involving, if you have, like for us, we have stretch goals for some additional cards that we're still working on. Maybe it's, getting some additional feedback on,
Love
some
that.
of that type of stuff. So
Yeah, I absolutely believe it's integral. I think that's why people go to Kickstarter, or is one of the big reasons, I should say. I'm sure it's not for everyone, but I think people want to be part of the campaign. I know, as you said, after the launch in July and then the relaunch now, preparing for the relaunch, you went and looked at Kickstarters and said, okay, what do we like? What spoke to us? What do we think looks good for a Kickstarter page? That is really good advice. Think about it as a backer and not somebody who knows your game inside and out. Look at the page and say, what does this tell me and how can I present my game so that folks will understand it in the way that I'm responding to this page is a huge thing. I'm constantly receiving marketing, and Edward jokes about this. I'm addicted to ads and marketing and commercials, but not in the way you think. It's a way of analyzing how I'm receiving that and how I'm responding. And so I'm really good at thinking about, oh, I kind of want to buy that now. Why? What did they do that made me feel this was something I needed? And how can I make that work for this Kickstarter? So everything that speaks to me in that way, I kind of analyze as how do I get that to translate? How do I use that marketing tactic? And for me, after I joined Kickstarter, I very quickly became a super backer because I backed a lot of campaigns. And what I was addicted to was getting in those comments and chatting with folks, talking about the game. Maybe it was an expansion and we'd talk about having played the base game and what our thoughts were on it and what we hope to see. And having the publisher, which way back at the beginning when I first started, right when Kickstarter started doing that, publishers didn't tend to listen to those comments and reply and say, sure, we'll add that in. That wasn't really how it was done back then. They were pretty much like, this is what you're getting. No. But that changed over time. And it started to become, hey, let's do a survey. What do you guys want? Do you want this or this? Or, hey, can you guys come up with something we should do? And one of the most recent campaigns I was involved in, Petrichor, had a deluxe edition and expansion. And David Terzi is a prolific designer, and David Sherkop was his co-designer. They were so great about being like, yeah, open it up, we'll make it. And people would chime in and be like, I want this berry flower. And they're like, that's awesome. All right, we'll figure it out. And they'd figure out how to get it in there. They loved the challenge. And that was an amazing campaign because the backers felt like they were helping design it, right? Like they were like, wait, I got to do that. And we're thanking them in the updates and saying, this backer came up with this idea. And the backer's like, oh, that was me. Like, hi, I did that. Like everyone was so excited. And then other backers are like, congrats, Barry. Like they were like just, and that type of interplay, again, going back to the convention question, I think that's what people miss about conventions is that kind of excitement over games we love with other perfect strangers. And that's something that Kickstarter can kind of replace if you bring folks in and kind of cultivate that relationship with them. And then I think you get loyalty, kind of that loyalty to the brand of like, well, that publisher listens to me and they care what I think, and now I want to follow their future campaigns and help them out because I felt valued as their customer. And that translates into everything. Where I buy my bread is because they know my name and say hi to me in the morning. So these are the things that really do translate into loyalty and wanting to back something. So I do think it's integral. I do think you want to create something really fun and inviting for your backers. I think that's a great way to, get backers involved. Let's see, what else? I know we had another one here. Oh, hi, Panic Games. Thanks for joining. So Panic Games says, for you, Amber, they really appreciate how interactive you are on social media, and it's made them invested in your campaign being successful. So kudos.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well done. And you have. I've seen you all over the place, and that is really, really great. So Chip says, we hear folks criticize when companies set their goal too low. It's good if you meet it, and good if it's quick, but can it happen too quickly? How do you set your Kickstarter goal numbers? Good question.
So for us, this was another thing that, to the earlier point of learning what you don't know, we set our goal pretty high the first time. And it was not because of us, trying to, ask for too much necessarily. It was, us looking at, what we wanted the future of the game to be.
Right.
And, working with a manufacturer and understanding minimum production runs and things along those lines. We were basing it off of, we didn't want to necessarily do the minimum. We were hoping to do somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
And
it gets cheaper when you Yes.
And then we didn't reach our goal as a result, because it's very hard to hit a high dollar value when you're a brand new company.
Mm-hmm.
So this time around, we've kind of taken a step back, and we know that, we're invested in the company and we're invested in the game. So we kind of took a look at, okay, we want to say we're investing a portion of us into the production, and we want to set our goal as the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing what that minimum production run is and the costs that go into that, we kind of took a look at, what we can put in ourselves, and then set our minimum goal as what we need.
Yep.
And then anything over that is fantastic. But we wanted to set it in a area where we felt like, one, it was achievable, but it was also the needed amount, not necessarily the amount we would like to have, kind of thing.
And perfect answer. I completely agree with that. I would advise people to think about basically what you need. What do you need to make this happen? And not the pie in the sky. That's kind of the point of the stretch goals. The idea is, or should be the point of the stretch goals. The idea is, okay, this is bare minimum. We make you the game. And for a first-time publisher, you bring up a very good point. That may be investing some of yourself into it. I'm not going to say I recommend that. I will never recommend that. But that's a personal choice that you can make, that, you know what, it's worth it to me to see this game made. I want to invest that. If you're financially sound enough to do that, go ahead. But otherwise, then you really should be looking at, what do I need to make the game? And then, okay, now there's a stretch goal to do this really cool thing that I really want to have in the game. Here's this stretch goal to do this other really cool thing I want to have in the game, but adds money. And that's how you move up and hopefully get to that pie in the sky amount. That is exactly why the structure of Kickstarter is the way it is. So my advice is keep that in mind, do that. It can be frustrating because, especially as an independent publisher, again, we talked about, this is your baby and you want it this certain way. No, but I want the linen finish cards. I don't want it without it. That's great. But if you can get it to the table where people are enjoying it, and for them the value isn't there for it to be, the linen finish, for them the value's down here and I pay a little less for the game, okay, then you should go with that. So figuring out your pledge amount based on, unfortunately, what could be the lowest, as you said, getting into the manufacturing side, it's, like with many industries, the more you order, because all the cost is really in getting the print run set up, all that setup cost and the decisions and getting it all laid out for the manufacturer. The more you make, the cheaper it becomes for each unit. So how do you decide? Well, honestly, go with the worst case scenario. Go with all right, worst case, we're only going to be able to make this many and it's going to be this price. Base it on that. Because otherwise, don't go with that, and there has been advice out there, but I would absolutely counter it personally. I don't go with the advice of, no, pick middle of the road and then just go for it and sell it in retail. You don't know that's going to work out. don't bet the farm. Go with, you know, the base and move up that way, just to be safe. I just, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd say the one other piece I would add is to make sure that you're thinking about not just manufacturing costs, but all the after the production's
shipping.
done
Yeah.
costs too.
Yes. There's a lot, and a lot of people get shipping wrong. It is not an easy thing to figure out, especially if you're going to ship internationally, and VAT cost and all of that. Figuring that out is really hard to do. I actually had a dream once where I met somebody, like in my head, I was at a convention, met an indie publisher, and they're like, I just threw in numbers. And I was like, no, don't do that. Do not do that. That's going to be really bad. You're going to end up paying for the difference. You've got to find somebody who knows what they're talking about and get the numbers right, because it can be a mess. So again, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, knowing what information you need. There's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of tools, and there's just a lot of experience in this industry. Maybe figure out a barter you could do with somebody, or somehow try to get that information from folks, because a lot of us have done the research, and at least could refer you to the right place, if not walk you through it, because it's a lot. It's definitely a lot to do. And Tony talked about the backer involvement again. It's okay if voting on a promo, for instance, but I've seen a game move away even slightly from what the designer envisioned based on a very close popular vote. And that's a really good point, and Tony, I always recommend for Petrichord, like I went to David and said, is there anything that we could put out there, like, you know, you could make this or you could make this, and then we can put it up to a vote, because you know you could do either thing. So they're still influencing which one it is, but you know that either is possible. In this case, the one I referenced as an example, they were watching the campaign, saw some suggestions just being bantered around, and said, we could do that. And it was that type of, so instead of it being like their hand was forced, they looked through the campaign and said, oh, that's a great comment. You know what? We're going to add that in. So it was more organic, I guess I should say. So yes, that is really good advice, Antoni. Watch out for putting things out there with too much breadth where it would change the game. You don't want to do that. You need to keep it, rein it in, as far as what you can add and what backers can suggest. They can't take over, right? Like you gotta have them suggest things that can be doable. So do you think big publishers basically using Kickstarter as pre-order system hurt the smaller publishers? This is a question that's been going around recently as well, especially with some big pre-order systems that are out there as well. I think Hasbro just used one, and some other larger publishers using that. What do you think about that, Amber? What have you seen?
It's one of those things that it's kind of a flip side, kind of like we're talking about October being a big Kickstarter month. It's one of those things that it could be a benefit from bringing in additional people to the platform, but it does draw a lot of attention and eyes to those big publishers. So, you know, you move further and further down in the list as an indie game publisher, as a result. So it's one of those things that it can both hurt and help. It's just hard to tell which one it does more.
Yeah, that's fair. I can see that. And the thing is, so going back a little while, and I know Luke has already left us, but Luke had asked the question, you know, why is board gaming niche? And the thing is that there's a number of big board game companies that are well known, right? I mean, we know Hasbro, you know, we had Parker Brothers, you know, it's not that it's not known. It's just more that folks don't understand that there's something called modern board gaming, where there's all these titles that aren't just, you know, Candyland and Monopoly and those games that we saw renditions of over and over and over again. And partly, I think that hurt the hobby too. I mean, when you see that there's 486 Monopolies, you just kind of assume there's no other games out there because they have to just keep reskinning it, right? So why would there be others? But having those big companies do something like that, or some of them coming over onto Kickstarter, like you said, maybe because it's mainstream, folks who didn't know there was this entire board game section of Kickstarter realize it's there. Maybe they
Right.
back a huge game company that has a tremendous marketing budget on Kickstarter, and then they start getting the Kickstarter email and start seeing that there's other games that maybe they want to back. So maybe they help move us out of being so niche and bring some awareness to other games. Like you said, double-edged sword, maybe not. Maybe they take all the limelight and it still remains the, oh, all I know about are these Hasbro titles and I don't know about the others. And not to pick on Hasbro, they make some good games too. It's just, a matter of who's getting that focus. I think people see, moving into big box stores has been a huge thing for the hobby, because being in Barnes and Noble and being in Target and Walmart helps people, you're going up and down the toy aisles, as we do when we're looking for a present for the 86th birthday party this, calendar year, and you're seeing these games, you start to realize that there's more than just, those 5 games you remember as a kid. But then I think also, as far as the niche comment, it's time. Folks don't have a lot of free time. And when they do, they're using it online and for video games or things that are immediately available, versus kind of that long reward that you get out of learning and playing a board game. Because let's face it, someone's learning the game, right? Someone's going to be teaching it. And of course, we all know that you can go online and see a live teach and play through and learn how to play a game. But most folks don't know that that exists and that there are YouTube channels dedicated to that, so that they don't have to sit down and read rule book. And I think when people are complaining they can't even read the books on their nightstand table, and there's never enough time for their hobbies, it's hard for them to think, okay, I want to buy this board game for my family, sit down, learn it, set it up, teach them, play it. That's very much a delayed gratification. So I think that's what keeps board games somewhat niche. And I think our job is to show people, no, you can go onto YouTube and kind of evangelize, like, you can be taught this game all together, sitting at the table. Your kids love YouTube. You're pulling up a YouTube person and they're going to teach the game and then you're going to play. Tell your kids, hey, go find me, a teach for this game. Go look on YouTube. Trust me, they know how to go Google on YouTube and find the teaches, and have them pick which one you're going to watch and sit down. That's how, when my kids were really little, before I was in the hobby itself or the business side of it, that's how I'd get them involved. I'd make them teach it, and I'd find games where they could open up the rule book and it was done like a comic book, or easy entry where they could teach the game. It made it easy for me. It kept them engaged. And yeah, it worked. But there is definitely a delayed gratification that I think keeps us not in the mainstream like video games and such. But I hope for the day when, we release board games and they sell out in an hour, like, Xbox. Right? That'd be amazing. Or
Yeah.
PS5. Can we do that? That'd be insane. Let's see. We have some other questions here. So Panic Game says the comment section always seems like hundreds of backseat designers. Yeah, I mean, they want to design a game, right? They're like, and this is the thing we talked about, like involving them as much as you can helps. And let's see. Used to think I could design a game, says Phil, but wow, not anymore. And then P.S. Did you enjoy your 10th anniversary wedding gift to yourself, Amber? I see it on the shelf behind you. All right, what was your 10th anniversary gift to yourself? Pandemic?
So, it was my gift to Brian, actually. I thought there wasn't a more perfect 10-year anniversary gift than a board game in a game that in a year that we're launching our own, as well as a pandemic year, and it's the 10th anniversary edition.
That is absolutely fantastic. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So I assume you posted that on social media.
I did.
Yes. So well done. That is a really clever gift. You're in a pandemic. It's your 10th anniversary edition. That is fantastic. And I see you have Dead of Winter up there too.
Yep.
Such a good game. That one. Oh yeah, and Betrayal at House on the Hill. Yep. Arkham Horror. Those are the ones that kind of brought me back into modern board gaming. So seeing those, I'm like, yep.
Oh yeah,
Love it.
I'm all about like the more horror genres of board games. And Brian and I were laughing before this because we were kind of talking about board games and what I like. And like, I always love the games where there can be a betrayer because,
Yes.
you know, it's not necessarily my normal nature, but I love being that sneaky person in a board game.
Same. So true. I don't like it when it's like a deduction type thing where like, I'm trying to think some of the werewolf, that type of thing. I don't know why, but in person, I'm not really good at like a werewolf type game. But when it's like Betrayal at House on the Hill, I want to be the traitor so bad. I'm so excited when I'm the traitor. It's so good. Because it's just that one, and you're just kind of like, okay, here we go. Oh, it's so good. Let's see, Tony says he played Lords of Waterdeep for the first time this week. Yeah, that's a good game. A lot of big fans of Lords of Waterdeep.
Another
So
one on
that's
the
up
game
there
shelf.
too. Yeah, I like the game shelf behind. That's awesome. So I do want to make sure we cover for Kickstarter, manufacturing and shipping. We kind of touched on a little bit. How did you prepare yourself for that? Because photography, graphic design, that's not covering the accounting, minutia, layered mess that shipping and manufacturing is. How did you attack that?
So that's a little bit where the day job comes in.
Okay.
So I do work for a CPG company.
Okay. There you go.
So I understand shipping and manufacturing
Okay.
in normal terms or my day job terms. So it at least helps from a manufacturer and shipping perspective,
Yes.
kind of understanding from the ins and outs that go with that. And then, just doing your research.
Yes.
There are tons of companies out there. There are tons of companies worldwide. And it's just, finding out the ones that have a good reputation,
Yes.
as well as that can provide you what you need, in a timely manner and at a cost that, fits your budget. So
Yes.
It's a lot to build in, and it's a lot of legwork and reaching out to people and getting quotes. But
Yes.
It is a big part of the entire process.
And see, that's where I'd say conventions can help, because talking to people and talking to other publishers, because they're more than happy to tell you. And that's why many of these companies really do need to, they got to stay on everybody's good side, because we do talk. And we will say, oh, this one, don't go with them. I had problem after problem after problem. Or this one, nope, completely receptive. They made some mistakes, but they fixed everything. Can't say enough good things about them. And so just like anything, like it's like you're buying something on Amazon. You're looking at the reviews, right? You're reading those and you're seeing the ratings. Asking folks what they're using for manufacturing and if they're happy with them, because there are so many manufacturing companies. And some of them, I will say, some of them aren't their own company, right? There's kind of front companies. So you're working with this person, but they're really using the manufacturing of this other company, but then they don't get first billing or first access to the machines because they're kind of going this weird, like when the machines are off type run. And that can be really problematic. And so you really need to understand what the company you're dealing with is offering, because there's a number of companies like that. And like you said, so you having that background, again, really primed you for being able to know the questions to ask. But manufacturing and shipping are a huge thing where, again, you don't know what you don't know. Right. So finding folks that can help you. And I will say, I don't always advocate finding folks that will help you for free. Offer something. Try to work something out with folks that might have the expertise you need, because you are asking a lot of their time and a lot of their experience that they put into learning this, potentially the hard way. So figuring out either a barter or, you know, maybe there's something you can do for them because you're really good at this other thing. Like trying to help each other in that way is a way to go about it. You know, I would tend to do favors for people from the beginning so that if I had a question, I wouldn't feel so bad asking later on, right? So it's very much about helping each other and trying to get the information you need to know. And like I said, we touched on shipping a little bit, and that's just straight up research, right?
Yeah.
Figuring
Lots
that
and
out.
lots of research.
And documenting that. So, you know, those are some of the pitfalls. And I have heard, as a warning, I've heard of folks, very smart individuals who now have run many campaigns, but initially ended up putting their shipping values or VAT values wrong and eating that. You know, and they've recovered and were able to keep making games, but those mistakes can be very costly. And speaking about some of those things that weren't delivered, some of them, those are exactly the types of things that happened is they didn't know exactly what things were going to shake out as, and they couldn't afford to then get it out there based on what they charged. So those are questions you need answered beforehand. That's not something you can figure out as you go. Phil asks, how did you all deal with the fallout from COVID and how it relates to shipping and manufacturing promises? Or do you feel you hit it at a good time?
I would say for us, I think it's grounded everybody in the industry that you need to be prepared for the unexpected. So that's one thing with our campaign that we're trying to do is under promise and over deliver, hopefully, from a, you know, when we're going to get a game in your hands kind of thing. We're trying to, you know, tack on time for shipping, for unforeseen circumstances coming up, because to your earlier point, there's likely going to be a hiccup along the way at some point. We haven't hit it yet, but we know that it's likely coming. And, you know, you need to plan for that into your estimate for when you're going to deliver a product. So that's kind of one thing that we kind of took away from it. And I'll say, you know, also just hearing all the different pieces of feedback that we've heard about Kickstarter and how a lot of games are not delivering on time, and that's a common occurrence sometimes. You know, we're trying to plan for that type of disruption. Yeah,
the buffer, really, really good advice. You know, pick when you think you can honestly deliver the game and then add 2 months or 3. Like give yourself time, because there will be stuff come up that you cannot foresee, and not just a pandemic, right? No one could have planned for this. And there are other things. There were sanctions. There were different tariffs that have happened during Kickstarter delivery for some companies. And that's the real problem, because you've already said X is what you need to pay to deliver, and now your stuff's on a ship and you have to pay more. So those are things that really can hit a publisher. And some publishers have gone to their backers and said, honestly, we can't ask you for more, and we won't. But if anybody'd like to chip in, we're covering this. And that's what brings me to communication. Just communicate with the backers constantly and regularly. And, you know, you brought up too many updates before, and I agree with that. You should not be using updates like the comment section. Updates should not be going out daily, even at the beginning of a campaign. You want to time your updates for like every 3 days. Otherwise, people are being inundated in their email box from you, and it can feel like too much. And they kind of can feel like, oh, what did I get into? Never mind, I don't want an email a day from this company. So you do not want to be doing updates constantly. You want to use your comment section, update in there, maybe do a news section on the Kickstarter page that changes, and then do your updates when they're robust and have everything in them, and you can add to them as you go. And then every, you know, maybe if something really big happens or a really big stretch goal, push it to 2 days, sure, right? You can adjust, but if it averages out to about 1 every 3 days or longer, then I'd say you're in a good spot. If you're doing multiple a day, you're going to see likely a spike in people leaving the campaign because they're just going to get frustrated with that. So there is such thing as over communication. Be wary of that. But if you hit delays or anything happens, hey, you know what? We got this sample in and we don't like it. It's not good enough. We don't want to deliver it to you this way. So we're sending it back and we're asking them to do something else. It's going to add a week. Understanding that as a backer, if I'm hearing that, well, I want my game to be better. I don't want it to be bad. 1 week later, okay, that seems like a good trade. And knowing that well in advance of the delivery date, okay, like I'm good. And usually you do see that. I look at a lot of campaigns and see how people are responding in the comment section. And when you're honest and open and like prepare people, they're usually... Of course, not everyone. There's always some people who are like, I'm so angry about this. But most people are pretty good about, getting those updates and getting that communication. So, yeah, definitely communication is the key for that as well. I think you have hit it at a good time. I'm glad for that because you knew in July, right, that where you were, and now, and things, there's definitely Kickstarter has recovered a bit, tons of Kickstarters on this month. So I think you've hit it at a pretty good time. Obviously, we never know what the future is going to bring. So create buffers. And last question, Panic Games says, is there a reason you guys went with a small portable game? And is this an area your company might be focusing on? And that's where I want to know, hey, do you have any plans for the future as well?
Yeah, so we love to do game nights. Pre-COVID, we would do like a weekly game night with friends. So like right now I'm set up on our ping pong table and that's kind of our game table as well, for all things board
Literally.
games. Yep, it is our game table for everything. But one of the things that we do is we like to go hiking. We like to do a lot of stuff outdoors. And we always have a portable cribbage board in our car or my purse or wherever. So when we do date nights, we might, go beer tasting or something and we play cribbage. And, we thought that this would be kind of a fun type of game that it's, roughly 20 minutes to play. It's a perfect game for like a quick game at, lunch at work or wherever, if you just like to game all the time. So it was a fun idea for us. And, spoiler alert, for any future games, we do like to have that portability aspect. So the ones that we do have concepts and design kind of working on right now for future things, we'll have some portability aspect for at least the next handful that we have ideas for. They may not all be a small, tiny little box, but I would expect at least the next couple to be a similar size.
I think that's a great niche to have. I mean, I always say my kids actually call our glove box the board game box because we keep a number of like Game Right games and smaller games in there so that when we, pre-COVID, we'd go to restaurants and having 4 kids, like keeping them entertained while we're waiting for food. I need something, right? Like otherwise they're just going to start getting loud or under the table or what have you. So bringing a board game, that's a great idea. And I can see that translating to date night too. Because absolutely. Throw that in your purse or bag and, go out for drinks and have something that you can sit there and engage over. I think that is actually a really good idea for introducing people to the hobby as well. Because I've definitely, sold my share of games by going to the bar. I mean, there was this Frog Juice? Yeah. Frog Juice is this game by Game Right. Totally a kid's game. And you have to say ribbon in it multiple times. And you play with cards. And I would play this at the bar with friends. And every time I would have all these people coming over being like, what's that game? I totally want that game. That's hilarious. Because you have to stick out your tongue. You have to do all these different things depending on the card you play. And people would see me and my girlfriends playing this and be like, that's really funny. Like, I actually really want to play that. And I am friends with, in fact, the last guest that we had on Girls Stampede was my friend Nora from Gremore Games. And I was telling her this at one of our lunch dates where we were talking about marketing and board games. And she's like, oh my gosh, I keep seeing like a monthly uptick on Frog Juice. She's like, it's you. You're going to the bar and playing it, and then people are buying it. And I'm like, I honestly probably, because it was that many people coming over being like, what is that? I want to get it. And translating it over, you know, this kid's game over to a bar game, because we just looked like we were having so much fun and couldn't stop laughing. So yeah, this is, that's really fun. And your kids, so Grayson and Jackson are in chat saying hi, Mom.
Oh.
See, now you're a YouTube star. You can tell them, like, I'm a YouTube star. Like,
Oh, they already want their own YouTube channel. So.
oh, yes. That's every kid's dream at this point. So thank you so much. I think great job on this interview. And I do want to say we will be covering Mini Steel coming up on a Lunchtime with Heavy Cardboard. So definitely take a look at that over on social media. You'll see Gremore Games will be covering on their social media when we'll be doing that, and we will as well. So make sure you follow them on social media. We have Amber's link here, but it's just Gremore Games, I think, everywhere, right?
Pretty
All
much,
social
yeah.
media. Yeah, so make sure you follow over there because they're doing a great job covering the game. Make sure you check out the Kickstarter as well. They're about 50% funded. So this is not sponsored in any way. This is just, you know, supporting Amber and Gremore Games. So take a look, and if it's something you think you might be interested in for a date night, pick it up. So thank you all, everyone in chat. Anything else you want to say, Amber?
No, I just want to say a big thank you to you, and honestly to everybody in the gaming community. That's just been so awesome to us. And, you know, if there's ever anyone that just needs a little bit of help or guidance, we're happy to, you know, pay it forward and help anywhere we can.
Awesome. That's really great to hear. See, you're a great addition already. Glad to have you guys as well. So congrats on the Kickstarter, and I'm looking forward to playing this on Lunchtime.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.